Imagine someone walking alone through an ancient field as the sun sets on the horizon and the wind blows softly, almost like a whisper from another dimension. It is in this setting that the revelation of one of the most mysterious secrets transmitted by Edgar Cayce, the so-called sleeping prophet, begins. He spoke of a sacred grain, a simple element of nature, but capable of creating an invisible field of protection around the one who possesses it, warding off negative vibrations and making space for a purer, more serene energy. The most surprising thing is that it is not just a metaphor. Cayce directly described the spiritual power contained in the simplicity of what nourishes the body but also strengthens the soul. Many believe that invisible forces circulate around us every day, some bringing balance and serenity, others laden with dark intentions and emotional imbalances. Most people do not notice when they are touched by these currents, but they feel their effects. Inexplicable fatigue, insomnia, lack of mental clarity, or even a weight that seems to accumulate on their shoulders for no apparent reason. Cayce affirmed that nature offers antidotes to these interferences, and among them would be this mysterious grain, a silent guardian that connects the human being to the universe's protective flow. As one delves into Cayce's accounts, a constant emerges, the idea that spirituality is not separate from daily life but present in every simple gesture. Eating, planting, caring for the land, all of this could be transformed into a sacred ritual when performed with awareness. Thus, the grain was not just physical food, but a link between the visible and invisible worlds. He said that this grain possessed a kind of spiritual memory, as if each seed carried the vibration of ancient civilizations that already knew its powers. This memory, once activated, would create a natural barrier against destructive forces. Imagine for a moment someone holding a handful of these seeds. They do not look different from so many other common grains, small, fragile, discreet, and yet Cayce affirmed that in them resides an energy that cannot be measured by physical instruments, but only felt intimately. Some say that by keeping them close, in a small bag or even in direct contact with the skin, an immediate sense of calm settles in, as if a veil of protection rises around the person. Others report clearer dreams, as if spiritual messages could pass through the darkness of the mind during sleep. The curious thing is that Cayce never treated the sacred with exaggeration. He did not say that this grain would solve all problems, but that it would become a spiritual ally. It is as if it were a key, but everyone had to open their own door. He compared its effect to how a candle's light can illuminate a dark room. It does not dissipate all the shadows of the world, but it creates a space where evil cannot establish itself. This vision leads us to reflect on how often we seek grandiose solutions when the mystery may be hidden in the simplest things in what the earth humbly offers. Think of how many generations throughout history have used grains in rituals, offerings, and spiritual celebrations. From the ancient temples of Egypt to the ceremonies of native peoples, the seed has always been a symbol of life, protection, and rebirth. Cayce seemed to merely recall what humanity's collective unconscious already knew, but had forgotten. He spoke of knowledge that is not lost, only hidden, waiting to be rediscovered by those ready to understand. Perhaps that is why the message about this grain resonates so much today. It is not just a curiosity, but a call to look at nature with new eyes. Some say that the power lies not only in the grain itself, but in the intention with which it is used. Carrying the seed merely as an object may have some effect, but when the person recognizes it as a symbol of protection, the energy intensifies. It is as if the spiritual field responds to human consciousness, amplifying the power of what is simple. Cayce emphasized that faith, intention, and purity of heart were the true catalysts. The grain merely made visible in a palpable way a connection that already existed. If you close your eyes for a moment and imagine this grain in your hand, you might feel something beyond matter, perhaps a slight pulse, perhaps a discreet warmth. It is in this subtle detail that the mystery resides. Many accounts associated with Cayce describe exactly this sensation, an object that, at first glance, seems insignificant, but which, when kept close, transforms the atmosphere around the person. Some describe it as if a gentle breeze rises like a wall against bad intentions that might approach. Others feel greater clarity in their thoughts, as if the weight of the world were relieved for a few moments. The sacred grain, according to Cayce, needed no adoration nor complex rituals. It asked for no sacrifices, nor demanded exaggerated reverence. Its function was silent, discreet, but profoundly effective. Perhaps this is the most fascinating thing, the idea that true spirituality is simple, accessible to all and present in the small things we usually ignore. There is no need to seek distant temples, inaccessible gurus, or secrets locked away. Sometimes what protects and strengthens is already in our hands, ready to be discovered. This teaching also leads us to reflect on how willing we are to believe in the invisible. The modern mind often demands tangible proof, immediate results, and scientific explanations. But Cayce reminded us that not everything can be measured or tested in laboratories. The spiritual world manifests in subtleties, in personal experiences, in signs that do not repeat identically for everyone. It is an invitation to open the senses beyond the obvious, to perceive that mystery is an essential part of life. By speaking of the sacred grain, Cayce seemed in fact to be leading us to a higher state of consciousness. The physical object was merely a vehicle, a starting point for something much greater, the awakening of spiritual perception. He spoke of protection, yes, but also of inner expansion, of clarity of purpose, of reconnection with the divine essence that exists in every human being, as if the grain were just a reminder, a palpable symbol of what already dwells within us. They say that every seed holds a secret, a promise of life waiting for the right moment to manifest. Edgar Cayce believed that the sacred grain possessed something more, a kind of hidden spiritual code, as if it were a spark of the creative energy itself. He affirmed that upon coming into contact with this grain, the human body not only received nutrients, but also aligned itself with a higher vibration, a frequency capable of warding off what does not belong to it. It is as if the grain were an ancient password, recognized by invisible forces, which then retreat in its presence. But how to explain this profound connection between something so small and such a vast effect? Perhaps the answer lies in how nature organizes its laws. Every plant, every seed, every element of the earth holds an energetic pattern. When the human being connects to this pattern, a bridge is created between the visible and invisible worlds. Cayce said that some grains in particular have a purer vibrational field, as if they were shaped to serve as a shield. They not only nourish the physical body, but also rebalance the subtle field that surrounds each person, which many call the aura. The aura, according to various spiritual traditions, is like a cocoon of energy that protects and reflects who we are. When it is strong and luminous, bad energies cannot penetrate. When it is weakened, we open space for external influences that drain our vitality. Cayce pointed out that this special grain had the ability to strengthen the aura, making it more resistant, clearer, and more expanded. Thus, it was not just protection against external evil, but also a way to awaken the inner glow that we often forget we possess. Think about how many times you have felt that a place or a person drained your energy. These are common situations, but almost always inexplicable. You enter an environment and, for no apparent reason, feel a heaviness, an anguish, a desire to leave quickly. Or you meet someone who, with few words, makes you feel exhausted. These are the so-called negative subtle energies, invisible to the eyes, but powerful in their impact. Cayce said that the grain worked as a natural filter against these influences. It does not prevent them from existing, but creates a gentle barrier that prevents them from sticking to us. And here emerges a fascinating aspect. This power does not manifest only when the grain is ingested as food, but also when it is simply close to the body. There are reports of people who carried small quantities in fabric bags, as if they were discreet amulets, and felt significant changes in their daily lives. It is not difficult to imagine why. Constant proximity would create a kind of energetic resonance, strengthening the person's spiritual field. Cayce, however, always emphasized that this was not superstition, but rather a natural manifestation of the energy contained in creation. Observing the history of ancient civilizations, we see that this type of practice is not new. Ancient peoples, spread across different continents, already knew that certain grains and seeds possessed sacred properties. They used them in rituals of protection, ceremonial harvests, and even in healing practices. For them, food was never just food. It was life, it was symbol. It was spirituality in its purest form. Cayce seemed to merely retrieve this forgotten knowledge and bring it to the modern world, where haste and skepticism often distance us from simpler wisdom. What is striking about Cayce's teachings is the delicacy with which he spoke about these forces. He did not use words of fear, he did not preach the terror of negative energies. On the contrary, he reminded us that light is always more powerful than darkness, and that the sacred grain was merely a way to facilitate access to this light. It was a reminder that each person already possesses within themselves the power to protect themselves, but often needs concrete signs to awaken that memory. The grain, therefore, was both symbol and tool, simple, discreet, yet profoundly transformative. Imagine a scene now. Someone places a small container with these grains next to the bed before sleeping. Night falls, dreams come, and something subtle happens. Sleep becomes lighter, nightmares dissipate, and unexpected messages appear in dreams, as if from a place beyond time. Many accounts associated with the use of this grain describe exactly this. Clearer, more vivid dreams, almost like spiritual encounters. Cayce said that this happened because by strengthening the energetic field, the person opened up to receive purer messages, without the distortions caused by negative influences. Another common scene reported by Cayce's followers: someone goes through a difficult period, surrounded by conflicts and tensions. By carrying the grain with them, they feel an unexpected relief, as if the burden were not so unbearable. Difficulties do not disappear, but something changes in how they are faced. It is as if the silent protection allows the person to maintain their inner clarity without being shaken by external chaos. This is the essence of the teaching. It is not about escaping life, but about living with more strength, more protection, and more awareness. It is also worth reflecting on the humility of this symbol. In a world where we so often associate power with grand monuments, rare objects, or inaccessible secrets, Cayce pointed to something simple, natural, accessible to anyone. This reveals a recurring pattern in authentic spirituality. The sacred is rarely in complicated things, but in the most humble ones. Perhaps it is precisely this simplicity that makes the grain so powerful. It does not boast, does not draw attention, does not demand anything in return. It is just there, silent, offering what it carries from its origin: protection, balance, and life. There is also a profound lesson about gratitude. Cayce reminded us that when using the grain, it was important to acknowledge its origin, to thank the earth that generated it, the sun that nourished it, the rain that watered it. This simple gesture of gratitude further potentiated the spiritual effect, because deep down the grain was not an isolated, magical object, but part of a great cycle of energy, and honoring that cycle was fundamental to aligning with it. This makes us think, how many times do we consume food or use objects without even perceiving the life story they carry? The sacred grain, therefore, is not just about warding off evil. It is about awakening the perception of the divine in everyday life, seeing that even in the smallest of seeds, there is a reflection of the universe's grandeur. It invites us to look beyond the surface, to perceive that the invisible reveals itself precisely in the smallest things. This change of perspective is perhaps the true miracle, realizing that we already live surrounded by sacred symbols, but rarely stop to recognize them. Some say that when Cayce described the sacred grain, his voice took on a different tone, almost as if he were repeating words that came not just from himself, but from a higher source. He spoke calmly, yet with a spiritual weight that left his listeners in absolute silence. Many wrote down every detail, trying to grasp the mystery hidden behind the simplicity of his phrases. It was not a technical discourse, but rather a transmission of wisdom, as if he were sharing something that had always been there, before us, yet invisible to ordinary eyes. The grain, according to Cayce, had a power that went beyond personal protection. It could also purify environments. Imagine a house laden with tensions where arguments happen frequently. where the air seems dense and heavy. By scattering small quantities of this grain in strategic points, as if they were silent guardians, it was said that the energy would begin to renew itself. The space gained a sense of freshness, as if a gentle breeze swept through the rooms, carrying away all that no longer served. This practice, though simple, brought impressive results to those who experienced it, and many reported an immediate improvement in mood and family harmony. Cayce also associated the grain with the idea of spiritual cycles. Just as a seed needs to be planted, watered, and cared for until it blossoms, the human spirit also goes through stages of growth. For him, carrying or consuming the grain was not just an act of protection, but also a reminder that we are all in constant evolution. Each person is a potential seed, capable of blossoming towards the light, provided they find the right soil. And just as the seed faces the darkness of the earth before emerging, so too do we pass through moments of shadow before achieving greater consciousness. This teaching is deeply symbolic, because deep down, life is made up of small, invisible rituals that transform us without us realizing it. By putting a grain in your pocket, by holding it between your fingers, by giving thanks for its silent energy, we are not just repeating a material gesture. We are connecting to a larger flow, to an invisible network of meanings that goes far beyond ourselves. It is as if, in this simple act, we open a door to remember that we are part of something immense that encompasses and protects us even when we cannot understand it. There are reports of people who, upon using the grain, began to feel subtle changes in their lives. Small coincidences started happening more frequently, unexpected encounters with people who brought important messages, opportunities that arose almost magically, dreams that seemed to anticipate future events. All of this was seen as a consequence of the energetic realignment that the grain provided. For Cayce, none of this was chance. When we are aligned with the correct frequency, life organizes itself more harmoniously. The grain was merely a catalyst for this synchronicity. Another fascinating point is the grain's relationship with intuition. Many affirm that by keeping it close, they were able to perceive signs that had previously gone unnoticed. A kind of inner clarity arose, as if a fog dissipated before the mind's eye. Difficult decisions became easier to make because the person felt more connected to their essence, less influenced by fears and external interferences. This expansion of intuition was seen as one of the grain's greatest blessings, as it allowed each individual to follow their own path with greater confidence. But Cayce warned, the grain was not a magic solution for all problems. He always emphasized that real protection came from purity of heart, sincere intention, and the practice of good deeds. The grain functioned as an ally, but never replaced the personal responsibility to live according to spiritual values. This balance between symbol and practice was central to his teachings. It was not about placing all power in an object, but about recognizing that this object helped awaken forces that already existed within each human being. Curiously, some scholars of Cayce's records believe that this grain could be identified with seeds used since biblical times, mentioned in ancient passages as bearers of strength and protection. Others see connections with Eastern traditions, where certain foods have always been considered sacred, not only for their nutritional value, but for the spiritual energy they carried. The important thing, however, was not the exact identification, but the understanding that there are elements in nature that transcend material function and become bridges to the invisible. Imagine someone going through a period of great fragility, feeling vulnerable to adversity. Upon approaching the grain, this person finds not just an external symbol, but an inner reminder that life always offers support. The simple fact of believing oneself to be protected already modifies one's energy, already strengthens one's aura. And as Cayce said, faith is the true fuel that activates any form of spiritual protection. The grain is not just the cause, but the means through which faith finds space to flourish. It is impossible not to notice how Cayce's message connects with a universal need. Everyone seeks protection, whether against misfortunes, against ill-intentioned people, or against invisible forces that steal our peace. The sacred grain emerges as an answer to this human desire for security, but offers something more. Instead of merely warding off evil, it teaches us to cultivate good, to nourish the inner light that naturally dispels darkness. Thus, protection becomes not just defense, but also expansion, growth, and enlightenment. Perhaps that is why so many people, upon hearing about this teaching, feel an immediate resonance. It is as if a dormant memory is awakened, reminding us that we already know somewhere deep in our soul that nature holds keys to our protection. It is not something new, but a remembrance. And this act of remembering can transform the way we look at the world. Suddenly, every seed, every food, every daily gesture gains a new meaning. Nothing is merely common, everything carries the mark of the sacred. Thus, reflecting on the sacred grain, we realize that the true secret lies not just in it, but in our ability to see beyond the obvious. The grain is a symbol, a bridge, an instrument, but the power it awakens is already within us. Perhaps this is the deepest lesson Cayce wanted to leave. Spirituality is not distant, not out of reach, does not depend on external miracles. It lives in the simple, in the everyday, in what the earth offers us in silence. And when we learn to recognize this hidden sacredness, we discover that we were never truly unprotected. As we delve deeper into the mystery of the sacred grain, a sense of silent reverence begins to form. It is not just an object of curiosity, but a living reminder that invisible forces are constantly working around us, guiding, protecting, and teaching. Edgar Cayce believed that this seemingly insignificant grain was a key left by creation itself, as if the universe had hidden within its simple form a profound secret about spiritual balance and protection. Perhaps that is why so many people who encountered his readings feel that they are not facing a superstition, but a calling. Imagine someone who, in the midst of an ordinary day, decides to carry this grain with them. Nothing changes dramatically to external eyes, but something within them begins to transform. Situations that once seemed overwhelming become lighter, unexpected encounters bring important messages, and even silences take on new meaning. The grain does not create noisy miracles, but awakens subtle miracles, those that are only perceived by those who have learned to listen with their heart. And it is precisely in these delicate signs that life reveals its spiritual dimension. Cayce said that the protection provided by the grain was like the presence of an invisible friend, a friend who does not demand, who does not interfere, but who is always ready to offer support in the most difficult moments. Many people reported feeling an immediate calm when holding the seeds in their hands, as if they were in direct contact with an energy that came from something much greater than themselves. This calm was not just emotional, but spiritual, as if the soul remembered its eternal connection with the divine. Another revealing aspect is the grain's relationship with healing. Although Cayce did not present it as medicine, he emphasized that spiritual protection is also a path to health. When the aura is strengthened, when the mind is calm, and when negative energies are repelled, the body finds space to regenerate. Several accounts speak of people who, by adopting the habit of keeping this grain close, experienced unexpected improvements in symptoms of anxiety, insomnia, or even physical pain. Perhaps because by eliminating the invisible weight they carried, they made space for life itself to flow more harmoniously. The grain, in this sense, is not an external remedy, but an internal reminder. It does not act in isolation, but awakens in each person the capacity for self-healing that has always been there. It is like a spark that rekindles the flame of vitality. Cayce insisted that every human being is capable of aligning with forces of balance and health, but we often forget this, lost amidst daily worries. The grain, then, functions as a symbol that awakens this memory, reminding us that the body, mind, and spirit form an inseparable unit. It is impossible not to perceive the depth of this teaching. In a world where we so often seek quick solutions, external miracles, or immediate explanations, Cayce invites us to look inward. The grain is not just about warding off evil, but about cultivating good. It is not just about avoiding pain, but about awakening strengths. It shows that true spiritual power does not manifest in grand storms, but in the silence of what is simple and discreet. It is in this silence that life speaks loudest. Now think about how many times you have felt unprotected, vulnerable, at the mercy of forces you did not understand. Everyone carries such moments. But Cayce reminded us that we are never truly alone. The grain is just a symbol of this truth, that the universe always offers a path of protection and balance. Recognizing this is, in itself, an act of faith, and faith, when sincere, is capable of transforming any reality. Many of Cayce's followers described mystical experiences linked to this grain. Some said that during meditation, holding it in their hands, they felt as if a soft light enveloped their entire body. Others reported visions of green and vast fields, as if they were in contact with memories of ancient times, where the spiritual use of the seed was common. There were even some who claimed to have received clearer and more direct messages from spiritual guides when using the grain as a focal point. All of this reinforces the idea that the seed functions as a channel, a bridge between the human and the divine. But Cayce made a point of clarifying. The power is not in the object, but in the consciousness that uses it. The grain is merely a vehicle, an instrument, a reminder. The greater energy comes from the connection we establish with it. This is a powerful lesson because it shows us that true protection does not depend on something external, but on how we relate to the symbols that life offers us. The grain, in this case, is a constant reminder that the sacred can be touched at any moment, as long as we are open to perceiving it. What is most striking is that the more one speaks of this grain, the more one realizes that it is not just a detail of Cayce's teachings, but a living metaphor for the spiritual journey itself. Just as the seed silently holds the promise of an entire tree, so too does each of us hold within ourselves a promise of growth and light. The grain is not just something that protects against evil, but something that reminds us of the good we can become. It invites us to awaken, to germinate, to blossom towards our highest destiny. Perhaps that is why so many people, upon hearing this story for the first time, feel an emotion difficult to explain. It is as if something profoundly ancient is being recalled, as if we are recovering a piece of wisdom that has always belonged to us. The grain does not just speak of protection. It speaks of origin, of purpose, of connection with that which is never lost. It is an invitation to live with more awareness, more gratitude, and more presence. In the end, Cayce's sacred grain is not just an esoteric curiosity. It is a metaphor for life, a reminder that true protection comes from the balance between the visible and the invisible, between body and soul, between earth and spirit. It shows us that we do not need to seek outside what already dwells within. Everything is already here: strength, light, protection. The grain merely awakens the memory. And perhaps this is the greatest revelation of all, to realize that the secret is not hidden in distant temples, nor in complex rituals, but in what life offers us every day in its simplest form. The true magic lies in recognizing the extraordinary within the ordinary, the sacred within the everyday, the protection within what at first glance seems like just a small seed,